Even with sky-high expectations and the eyes of the entire stock market set on Nvidia's earnings, boy did they deliver, and not only deliver, exceed all expectations. Hey guys, hope you're doing well out there. Today we're taking a look at Nvidia Corporation, ticker symbol NVDA. They just reported their Q2 numbers, and spoiler alert, they were absolutely stellar. In the after hours, I'm seeing the shares up roughly 10%, and that's after they were up roughly 3% in the regular trade. We'll dive into their press release, take a look at their all-important outlook, jump into their revenue by market, and yes, you see this data center number jump. As always, dive into their statement of income, balance sheet, and cash flows, and take a look at this from a technical chart pattern. No, this is not a picture of an escalator going up. It is the stock chart of Nvidia. As always, if you are new to the channel and find this type of content valuable, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. It would mean a lot. Nvidia now trading at a market cap of likely close to $1.3 trillion tomorrow if these gains hold up, which I'm sure they will. Over the past year to date, the stock is up just a casual 220%, more than tripling, and that doesn't include these gains in the after hours. Over the past 1 year, up 170%. They posted their second quarter results, and spoiler alert, they were absolutely fabulous. Revenues coming in at $13.5 billion. That was up just 100% from a year ago. Expectations were closer to $11.1 billion, so more than a $2 billion beat on that top line. You see data center revenues coming in at $10.3 billion. That was up 140% from just a quarter ago and 170% from a year ago. Non-GAAP EPS coming in at $2.70. That was up 430% from a year ago. Guys, estimates were closer to $2.09, and estimates for next quarter were at $2.39. They just posted a quarter where they put up earnings of $2.70. Certainly these estimates on Nvidia, and if you look at it, analysts over the past month have only revised their earnings upwards, and Nvidia still was able to blow those out of the water. So certainly these full year estimates of EPS and revenues have to be moved up higher. Currently expectations are at $8.18 for this fiscal 2024. That certainly has to go up, and most likely so do all these future earnings. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang saying a new computing era has begun. Companies worldwide are transitioning from general purpose to accelerated computing and generative AI. Certainly, based on these numbers, a new computing era has begun. During the quarter, major cloud service providers announced massive Nvidia H100 AI infrastructures, and the race is on to adopt generative AI. Certainly, when your customers are the likes of Meta, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, yeah, you'll be raking in money left, right, and center. In this most recent quarter, Nvidia purchased roughly $2.8 billion worth of shares, and they still have roughly $4 billion left under their current share repurchase authorization. Not only that, the board of directors approved an additional $25 billion in share repurchase without expiration, and Nvidia does plan to continue share repurchases for this fiscal year. I'm not sure if that's really needed, as the stock has absolutely skyrocketed, but they certainly have the ability to continue with their share repurchases. Moving on to the outlook for Nvidia. Now, this is what I think is sending shares higher in the after hours. They are expecting revenues to come in at $16 billion next quarter, plus or minus 2%. Analysts were closer to $12.4 billion in their estimates. Clearly, most analysts on Wall Street need to become better at their jobs and making better estimates. Now, this is what I think investors really had their eye on, is this revenue outlook number. Everyone knew this current quarter revenues would come in great, and so revenue outlook is really what dictated how the stock performed in the after hours. You see, non-GAAP gross margins are expected to come in at 72.5% next quarter, and so while they're raising their revenues by roughly 170% on that year-over-year basis, if this $16 billion number holds, they're also increasing their gross margins. So on substantial higher revenue, they're able to increase their gross margins. That is absolutely phenomenal to see. And both of these things are likely the reason why shares are higher in the after hours. Moving on to the quarterly revenue by market, We see that data center is what really exploded in this most recent quarter. That was up roughly 140% on a quarter-over-quarter basis. You see jumping from $4.2 billion just a quarter ago, now at $10.3 billion. A year ago, this was sitting at roughly $3.8 billion. That is growth of 170% on that data center side. Certainly all these large infrastructure companies needing those Nvidia H100 chips in their AI data centers, and boy, demand for them has absolutely been skyrocketing to the point where Nvidia probably can't meet that demand and their revenues are being held back by the lack of supply. You see even that gaming segment saw a nice growth of roughly 20% on a year-over-year basis, up from $2 billion roughly to $2.5 billion. Yeah, that total revenue number jumping all the way up from $6.7 billion same time last year up to $13.5 billion. Moving on to the statement of income, we have that $13.5 billion revenue number. That was good for 100% growth on a year-over-year basis. You see cost of revenue jumping just marginally compared to that revenue number. That was up from roughly $3.8 billion same time last year to just $4 billion. And yeah, when you raise your revenues by roughly 100% and your cost of revenue by close to 10%, yeah, your gross profit will absolutely skyrocket, which it did, up from $2.9 billion same time last year to now $9.5 billion. Guys, these numbers are absolutely incredible. This growth rate is something to marvel at, and certainly this AI hype cycle is not just hype, as it reflects in their top line absolutely exploding. We see they were able to hold operating expenses in check, as those only went up roughly $200 million up to $2.6 billion of total operating expenses. Yeah, when you take $9.5 billion worth of gross profit, you minus off $2.6 billion worth of operating expenses, you come to an operating income that more than 10x'd from a year ago, up to $6.8 billion worth of operating income. That is phenomenal. We get to add back some other income and we come to a net income number of roughly $6.2 billion. A year ago, this was sitting at just $600 million. You see that net income on an EPS side absolutely jump. Guys, this is hard to even compare it to itself on a year ago basis. Nvidia doesn't even look like it's the same company it was last year. Net income non-GAAP coming in at $2.70. Yeah, that beat all expectations. You see their weighted average shares outstanding are actually decreasing due to that buyback Nvidia has in place. Moving on to the balance sheet, this paints a 6-month picture. We see cash and cash equivalents jumped roughly $3 billion up to $16 billion worth of cash and cash equivalents. We see inventories actually tick down. That's likely going to continue, as Nvidia will likely have a hard time meeting the demand due to supply constraints. We see total current assets sitting at roughly $29 billion, total assets sitting at close to $50 billion. Absolutely nothing to worry about on this balance sheet. They have very little short-term debt, total current liabilities at just $10 billion, and total liabilities coming in at $22 billion, as they can pay off all of their liabilities in just current assets. So certainly nothing to worry about on this balance sheet, and it will likely only just get better as their cash flows improve substantially over these upcoming quarters. Moving on to the statement of cash flows, we bring down that $6.2 billion net income number. Last year that was sitting at roughly $600 million. We get to add back some things such as stock-based compensation, depreciation, which they actually don't have a lot of, surprisingly. All things considered, net cash provided by operating activities in 3 months ended came to $6.3 billion. They used roughly $500 million in investing activities, used up another roughly $3 billion in repurchasing their common stock, paid down some debt, paid out some dividends. All in all, added roughly $800 million to their cash pile. Absolutely phenomenal on a cash flow basis, and with Nvidia authorizing that $25 billion share repurchase program, they'll continue to use their cash flows in more shareholder-friendly ways. They have very little debt, but they can continue to pay that down. Obviously, continue to do more buybacks. They can possibly raise their dividend, as they have lots of room to do that. and certainly invest back in their business. So on a cash flow side, Nvidia is looking very healthy and extremely shareholder friendly. Moving on to the technical chart for Nvidia, this will absolutely likely gap up tomorrow. I do see in the after hours it's up roughly 7%, closer to $504 per share. Now, it is certainly near the top end of this uptrending channel. And so this uptrending channel, it's been locked into since October of last year. Now, I do see Nvidia hitting its head at the top end of this channel, closer to $530 to $540 per share, at which point I think it's likely to come and backtest the bottom range of this channel. Now, if you don't have a position in Nvidia, if you want to accumulate this stock and make it a position in your holdings, I do think this $450 level near the bottom end of this range is a good entry point. Now, I wouldn't unload a full position into Nvidia at these levels. Certainly, there's not a whole lot of volume for this stock at these prices, as majority of the volume is down here closer to this $250, $300 level. And at some point, I do see these large gaps that it will likely make tomorrow, and a gap like this, which it made in its last earnings call, I do think those tend to get filled at one point or another. However, I do think this bottom range of the channel would be a good first entry point for Nvidia, and it's a point where I wouldn't blame you for stepping in, as dips in an uptrending channel in a stock like Nvidia can absolutely be bought, especially when its fundamentals are getting drastically better, its earnings are continuously being revised up, and it's guiding for roughly 170% growth on that top line. Nvidia and AI are absolutely in a boom cycle, and certainly this stock does deserve to be up 8% in the after hours and deserves its year-to-date gains of roughly 220%. The fundamentals for this company are absolutely stellar, and while on the surface it does trade rich, I think analysts don't have the estimates still right for Nvidia, as they're continuing to exceed expectations on that guidance side. And so certainly any large dips in the stock can be a fantastic buying opportunity. That was my take on Nvidia Corporation. Let me know what you guys think of this one in the comments below. Are you buying, selling, or holding Nvidia at these prices? As always, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next video.